We still have a few that are trying to join, but we'll go ahead and get started. This is the second of the three series class for RedCap. Today we'll be talking about some quick arrangement of projects within RedCap. We're going to create a multi-survey project together. Well, I will be creating it, and you can follow along if you want. We're going to talk about a little bit about e-consent and IRB considerations. And then if we have time, we'll touch on some RedCap reports and report writing features that are built in within RedCap. So to get started, we'll get to the basic. Um, if you're viewing my screen, you notice that I'm on the My Projects tabs. Everyone that has a sign in will have a My Projects tabs. This section of RedCap is all the projects that you have created or that you have been added to by another RedCap user. So if you have a list of projects and you're looking for a specific one and you can't find it, chances are either you've not been added to that project yet or you have been added incorrectly. So if you don't see the project that you're looking for on your list, you're going to need to contact your either the person in charge of the project or your boss, PI, whatever. They will need to add you to that project. If you contact me, I'm basically going to send you to that person. I do have the ability to add people to projects, but we generally don't do that simply for security reasons. When you add someone to a project, you need to know what their permissions are going to be, what type of impact they're going to have on the project, how they're going to use the project, so on and so forth. I generally don't know what those permissions should be. So I'm going to immediately ask you to contact the project owner or administrator. So this also applies if you are planning on leaving UK and you have a bunch of projects out there that people need access to. You need to go ahead and get that access to those people before you leave UK. Once you've left, um, people can request to have access to those projects, but unless you have a PI or a director or something like that, get a hold of me. Generally, the answer is going to be no, simply because that's a huge security thing for us. Um, to have access to other people's projects without their permission. So just make sure you take care of that as your project goes along. Again, you can organize these projects any way you want. You notice I have different colors here and things like that. That is here under the organize um, section. You can add these colors, rearrange them how you need them. Um, it's basically just a visual aid. If you need to separate them by certain sections, things like that, projects, grants, whatever, you can. If you don't want to, they'll just simply be like this section here. These are the ones that I've not organized. So that is pretty much arranging your projects within RedCap. That was quick and easy. It's not that big of a thing. But we are going to create a multiple survey project together. And we will do that from the new project tab. We'll give it a name. Our project is just going to be for fun. And then, of course, if you wanted to assign it to a folder that we just created, you could. What we're going to do is we're going to use a template so that it builds the project for us, most of it anyway. And we're going to do a multiple survey classic. All of these templates are very good if you're wanting to create some test surveys, test databases. They're very good because they build most of the project for you. They won't add data, but they will build all the questions and things like that for you. So if any of these things you're interested in, you maybe want to build a test project just to see how it works. I definitely recommend doing that. It's a little easier. You don't have to, again, you don't have to add in all the questions. You can modify it if you want to, but it does a lot of the work for you on the front end. So I definitely recommend using those for test projects and things like that. Obviously, for a real project, most of these will not be suitable for you. Most of our projects are pretty unique, but you can use them if you want to. So we're going to use a multiple survey classic template. And then if you notice, we'll look at our record status dashboard here, and it has added, it looks like 3 surveys and then a data entry form for us um, as part of that build. So let's go back to our setup. So you notice that on our first setting, we have used surveys in this project. So REDCap has already turned on some of those instruments to be used as surveys. We'll go down. This section is pretty much good for us today. We'll go to our next section, the Online Designer. And we see here that we have 3 of them that have been enabled as surveys, and then 1 that's just a data entry form. So that'll just be for people that are working on our team. Those of us that are in the office or what have you, those that have access to this project will be able to see this form, but yet your participants, your customers, clients, what have you, will not be able to. So this is a multiple survey project, which means that our clients or participants will be getting multiple surveys. It could be over a period of time. It could be all at once. Again, this just depends on how your project is going to work. If you want them to do a pre-survey and then immediately after they get finished, do the participant survey, you can do that. You can have it set up to where REDCap will send them an email with the following surveys. You can set it up to where REDCap will do this. The survey queue here, uh, you can turn this on and it will set up the survey in a particular order that you want them to receive it. Maybe you don't want them to see or to get the follow-up survey. Maybe you want them to do the participant or patient morale questionnaire first. Again, this all depends on how you want your project to work and how you want it to function. You can set its logic here. So say there's a question in your pre pre-serving pre-screening survey. Okay, so you've got a type 2 diabetes, yes or no. Maybe you only want those that chose false to receive a particular survey, or vice versa. If they say true, maybe you want them to start receiving the other surveys in your project. Again, this all depends on how your project's working, the type of questions that you're asking. This could be going to both male and females, but you only want the data on a particular project or a particular survey. Maybe it's a pregnancy question. You only want that to go to females. You can set that up in that survey queue. So all these things keep in mind when you're building your project. This is one way to have participants see the next set of surveys. You have this option, and then you have the automatic invitations option. So those are the 2 options that you have where REDCap will automatically send or display the next set of surveys in your project. Every project has this field here. Either it says participant ID or it says record ID. That only shows up on the very first instrument in your project. It does not show up in the rest of these surveys or instruments. And the reason that is REDCap needs this participant ID or record ID as a way of distinguishing each row of data. So I recommend, do not modify this. REDCap will automatically put a sequential number in this for you. Your participants will not see this. So if we were to look at our survey right now, Our survey starts with date of birth. That participant ID is not showing up. It's doesn't show up to the participants. Um, Anyone filling out your survey will never see that. But what will happen is when you go to your record status dashboard, it will show up here for participant ID. That'll be a number one, a number two, number three, number four, number five, so on and so forth. That is just REDCap's way of distinguishing each row of data. So if you have a survey that is simply quality assurance, there's no identifying numbers, there's no way to tell that Susie took this survey and Jane took that survey. That's the reason. REDCap needs something, some sort of identifier to identify each survey that is coming in. So it will do that automatically. You can turn that function off if you don't want that on your you don't want that in your data. Everyone has their own unique identifier, what have you. You can turn that off, but again, that's completely your choice. For your surveys, your first survey is the only one that will receive a link, uh, a URL to that survey. All your other surveys must be toggled off of either that survey queue or that automatic invitations. Now, you can manually send those surveys out, but you're going to need an email address or something like that. If you want REDCap to do it all automatically, um, you need to use one of those two options, the survey queue or the automatic invitations. So basically, when you start your survey, your project, you would manually send out this pre-screening survey using that public link. You would email that to them, post it on a website, send it to a listserv, however you want to get uh, your survey to those participants. It could be a QR code. If you wanted to create a QR code for that individual survey, you could do that as well. However, you need to get that survey to your participants, that's the way you would use. After that, the surveys would either go to them or be displayed to them at a time of your choosing. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're going to be using the email section, your very first survey that you send to them needs to have a question that says, "What is your current valid email address?" REDCap is going to capture that email and save it for the rest of the project. So all these things you need to keep in mind when you're building your original or your initial survey. If you've only got one survey in your project, you don't necessarily have to worry about any of this. But if you're going to have multiple surveys or you think you might in the future add another survey to this project, you need to go ahead and start collecting that data now so that you have an email address, a valid email address for everyone that is coming into your project. That way you can send them an additional survey if you need to, or maybe a quality assurance, how did we do type survey, anything like that in the future. Because what you don't want to do is 6 months down the road want to add a survey, but you only have one or two email addresses for all of your participants. Maybe you have 100 participants that have already replied. What you don't want to do is have to talk to them again or contact them again and ask them for an email address. If you already have that information, you're ready to go and they can just start receiving your surveys. To do an automatic invitation survey, if we want this participant info survey to go out right after the pre-screening, we would go straight across here, this line, and click on automatic invitations. This whole section here is just like a regular email. This part here you do not want to change. This you can change, but not any of this. This has a survey link embedded into it for your next survey. Your subject line is here. You can put whether it's coming from you or an optional name, whatever you want to put. Over here are the conditions. So we want this to go out right after the pre-screening survey. And again, you have this additional logic that you can put in. So if we wanted to know we want this to go to only those people that have type 2 diabetes, we would go in and choose that option. Let's see if I can get it to pull up. So once you put in a bracket, it's going to give you all of the variables that are in your project. And you simply go in and find the one that you want to do. So has diabetes, I currently have. Say yes, equals. I think it was number one for yes or true. It'll tell you that it's valid. And that means that it has found that variable. That variable is correct within the database. So you want to look for that valid. If that does not show up, that means you have either typed in something wrong or you don't have a valid variable. My suggestion is when you're typing this out is to pull a variable from your list that shows up. That is the easiest way to make sure you have the correct one. Now, one thing to keep in mind, just because this says valid does not mean that this is going to pull the information that you want. If our true option is actually 0, well, then it's going to pull everything that was false. Or if we put some sort of equation in here, REDCap is looking for a valid variable name. As long as you have this correct, it's going to say valid here. But again, it does not mean that your equation or that your syntax is actually correct. So you're going to want to double check that on the back end somehow. Maybe pull up Google or something, especially if it's a large equation, a BMI equation or something like that. You're going to want to double check that because REDCap is just looking for a valid variable. So keep that in mind when you're doing any type of syntax or coding or anything like that within REDCap. Just make sure you double check it and go through your survey and type in some things and choose some options to make sure that it's working correctly. You're going to want to set this whole thing up and have it send the next survey to you, to yourself, to make sure it's coming correctly. Obviously, you'd want to put send immediately so that you're not waiting several days for your next survey to come in. But all these things you need to test when you're creating and building these projects because you do not want to send this out live to 1,000 people and then realize 2 or 3 days later that you've got a major error and all the data coming in is incorrect. So please, please, please test all of these functions that you're using within your project. Once we have a date set or a time, whatever, if you want to do optional reminders, you can. REDCap will continually send these reminders. So again, if you have this going to 1,000 people, you may not want to put on the reminders because sometimes REDCap will send you a reminder. Hey, I just sent out a reminder to this person or that person or whatever. And a lot of times these reminders can be annoying, depending on who your audience is. Obviously, we don't want to annoy the people that we're trying to collect data from. So if you do use this optional reminder, make sure that it's maybe only sent once. If you put this 5 times, they're going to get 5 reminders from you. So just keep all that in mind when setting this information up. Once you save, um, it'll say, okay, we need to activate this. This is now active for this survey. And you'll get a little green check mark beside, letting you know that you have an invitation set up. So right now, again, we need to make sure that our pre-screening survey has an email address. So we are asking for an email address, and there is one more step that we need to take to make sure that this automatic invitation is working. It looks like our project, the template already turned that on for us. This must be enabled. This designate an email field for communication. This tells REDCap to save all that email address, that variable, save all the email addresses coming into the project because we're going to be using it later for future surveys. If you have those steps in place, then if we were to fill out our survey, put in our real email address, it would send us the next survey automatically. So the goal is to manually send out this first survey to all your participants and sit back and wait for all the data to come in. That's the goal with using RedCap. You don't want to have to go in every month or every week or every day and manually send surveys to your participants. You want RedCap to do all the work for you. So again, you sit back and watch the data roll in. That is the goal with using these features within RedCap, especially if it's a multi-survey project. If it's just a single survey, again, a lot of this stuff is not going to apply. But if you are using multiple surveys, you want to make sure that you have all this either or the automatic invitation or the survey queue. I do not suggest using them both. I have seen projects where they've tried to use both of them and it simply confuses RedCap. RedCap doesn't know, okay, are we using this or are we using this? So keep that in mind. There's also one more setting that you can use that will confuse RedCap. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. This option. If you have this auto continue to the next survey, it will conflict with your automatic invitations and your survey queue. So make sure that this is not enabled if you're using one of those two options. So again, I know this is a lot of information to try to remember, but it is important. Just make sure that you're using the correct. This will mostly come into play if you have been tasked to work on a project that is already in existence, that's already been in circulation, it's already been created. You're going to need to go in and check survey settings, automatic invitations, and survey queue to make sure that one or none of those options are being used. If there's a bunch of them being used, RedCap will most likely just choose one that it wants to use, but it may not be conducive to what you're wanting or how you're wanting it to work on your project. So again, I know a lot of you all will be thrown into a project that's already in circulation or something like that, and you're just kind of poking around trying to figure out what's going on. Those three things, if it's a multi-survey project, you need to check survey settings, automatic invitations, and survey queue. That way you know how the surveys were working before. And if you need to change them, that's where you do that. Now we're going to get into some of our surveys. Most of our surveys, especially after COVID, all have an e-consent. If we're using, collecting some sort of PHI, if we're collecting data from people under 18, all that sort of thing. A lot of our forms or surveys have a consent form on them. And the consent form actually is very nice because it will save a copy of a form or consent that someone has filled out. It saves a copy for your records. It allows them to download a PDF copy of their own consent that they have sent you. So it's very handy when it comes to trying to get this information legally and having a backup. We have a consent example, e-consent example over here on the left side navigation. This is always here. And if you click on it, it will pull up the project, give you a little rundown of the consent, how it works, how you should use it, things like that. And then it gives you an example that you can go in and fill out. Um, it'll give you the example of the PDF that you can download, all that sort of thing. Again, I definitely recommend that you try this out, especially if you're never used an e-consent before. And if you're trying to apply for an IRB, I would definitely suggest that you go through the e-consent process, because this is important to also remember, just because you are using the e-consent within REDCap for a project does not mean that the IRB will approve your submission. The IRB, they're going to want to know how your e-consent works within REDCap. And if you have absolutely no idea how e-consent works, you're not going to be able to explain that to them, how it works or how it works for your particular project. So this is all things that you'll need to learn before you submit your um, proposal or whatever to IRB. Because if you can't show them and tell them how that your e-consent works, then they're not going to approve it because they realize that you don't know what you're doing. So the e-consent and applying for IRB is a very important step. So that's something that you're going to need to be aware of, and you're going to need to have knowledge how it works for your project. So please keep that in mind. Make sure you know how your e-consent works. Um, if we wanted to set up an e-consent, it's this green option here. We'll do an enable e-consent, and then it's going to ask us what survey. Most likely, our first survey would be the e-consent. I have seen projects where, excuse me, the first survey has, pre-screening information, a couple little questions about, type 2 diabetes. Do you have it? If you don't have it, maybe you don't apply or you're not a candidate for this project. Um, so that may be a way of weeding out the people that um, won't be a good fit for your project or whatever you. Maybe the next form is the e-consent. The e-consent can be anywhere within the project as long as it's before you collecting all the PHI information. So it doesn't have to be the first one, and it doesn't have to be the second one. I've seen projects where there's an e-consent for the a teenager. So the teenager fills out some information, maybe puts their parent's email address or whatever, and the e-consent is sent only to the parent. Again, you can have this as complicated or as simple as you want. The e-consent is going to be looking for a first and last name on this survey. On ours, it's on our participant info survey. So in this case, we would have the e-consent on the participant info survey, simply because that information hasn't been collected yet. So again, you need to keep all this in mind when creating an e-consent. The e-consent's going to want to know a first and last name, and if you have a date of birth field, you can use it. It's an optional. It completely up to you. Whatever you choose here will show up on that PDF that they print out and that is saved for you. So keep all that in mind when you're creating an e-consent form. Again, it doesn't have to be first, but it does need to be before you start collecting PHI. First and last name, not so much a PH, not so much PHI information. It's when you get into the medical health, Social Security numbers, medical ID numbers, things like that is when it comes in. It needs to be before that information is asked. Um, and just be careful where you ask the information. I mean, technically, you could drill down in a pre-survey and find out exactly who that person is if you've got that data. If you've got it down to their first, middle, and last name, address, county, uh, all that you've got all this information in your first survey before the e-consent. I mean, technically, you could drill down and find that person if you were to receive that data. So just be careful how you word and where you ask your questions for these people. First, last name, email address, that might be all you need to know. And whether they have type 2 diabetes or have they ever had cancer or whatever information you're trying to collect to make sure that they are a good fit for your project. Um, so all these need to be thought about before you start creating your e-consents. And again, you may want to work closely with your IRB representative. Obviously, IRB, they know exactly what the e-consent framework is in REDCap. We discuss it with them all the time to make sure that it's still up to par with regulations and things like that. So just make sure that you understand how the e-consent works, where the snapshots go. You've got a thing here for PDF snapshots for records. So if we had any, they would be saved here for you to view. And so yeah, they you can build an e-consent. So if we wanted to add some e-consent information here, we could simply ask them a simple "Do you consent?" Um, and we could ask them first and last name if we wanted to, as long as our variable is different than what was on that other survey, we should be good. And we have date of birth. So if we wanted to make this an e-consent, grab their first name, we'll grab their last name, and we'll go ahead and throw in the date of birth. So if you want additional, again, these are additional options. If you wanted additional things, maybe another signature field, what have you, you can do that. If you want to save this, of course, you all won't have this option, but this is where the file is saved, which would be here on the left side navigation. So it lets you know where it's going to be saved. Um, I'll do a save. It lets you know, hey, you're good to go. Now your e-consent shows up here, so that you can see. You can have multiple e-consents for a project. So again, if you were sending this to an underage teenager, maybe you have their consent and then you have their parents' consent. It can be two different ones. Um, it just depends on how you want your project to function. So if we were to go and fill out our survey, let's see, we'll do and this is what the e-consent would look like for them. They can they have to certify the information is correct, but they also have the option to print it if they want to. They can just hit the little print button or the download button. They get to save a copy, and you'll get a copy as well. So if we hit submit, think you have a nice day. If we go over here to our record status dashboard, we now have one survey. I was participant number one. You get a green check mark because that is from the internet. It's a completed survey response. And then we have additional options. So if we wanted to go ahead and fill out some of this information for them, we could. Or if our automatic invitations or survey queue is set up, we're just waiting for these bubbles to turn a particular color when they fill out the information. So our file repository, we have one PDF snapshot. And there is the PDF of the e-consent that I just filled out. So if this is something else to consider, if you are working on a project and you have, say you have 5 to 10 data entry students that are simply just raw data entry, just punching in some numbers for you. Um, maybe you don't want them to have access to all this information. Um, that would all be set up in the user rights. Again, this is why we don't add people to projects. I don't particularly add people to projects unless I have some sort of authority from a director or PI or something like that, because I don't know, anyone in this meeting could request me to add them to a project. I don't know if they're really working on that project. I don't know who the person is that created the project. I don't know if they know them. So that is why anytime you ask for access to a project, I'm going to tell you to go find the admin of that project or the owner of that project. Simply because I don't know if you know those people or you should have access. That's not my responsibility. That's the person that created the project. So that is how you do an e-consent. Now we have a little check mark. We know that, okay, we've got a live e-consent going. Um, and then you also get a little, it looks like a little person here letting you know that there's an e-consent on this actual survey. So that's pretty much e-consents in a quick nutshell, I guess you would say. Um, just make sure that you know where your e-consent works. When you apply for an IRB, excuse me, it's good that you send them a link to your project so that they can go through and maybe fill out your e-consent. They may want to see what it looks like live. They're going to want to see exactly what the participants are going to see. And to show them, you would copy this link. That is your public survey URL. That will be a link to your very first instrument on your project. Now, if you wanted to do some report writing on the information that you've collected, your record status dashboard is where all your data will sit. It'll be just a list of all the data that you have that has come in your project for the entirety of your project. So unless you have physically went in here and manually deleted some data, that's everything that's come into your project. Each person will be obviously separated and they will have their own little row. If you had 10 or 12 surveys, they would all be listed across the top here. If you wanted to do some report writing on some data, you simply go to Data, Exports, Reports, and Stats, and then you can create a new report. You can export the data. We touched on this a little bit on the first class. You can export the data in any of these statistical packages. You can remove identifiers however you want to export the data, you can. You can do this as many times as you want because an export is only a screenshot of the data. So you can actually do this while data is still coming into the project. Again, it's just a screenshot. No data is actually removed from your project. It basically takes a picture of the project data and lets you run some numbers on it. So if you would prefer Excel or something like that, this is how you would download into those options. If you want just some quick numbers, obviously we've got one row of data, but if we wanted to create a report, you can put a description, name, who has access to the report. Do you want all people in the project to have it or just a few? Um, all the fields, this is every field or variable within your project. You can report write on anything in your project. Um, many different options, filters, live filters, how you want in ascending order, descending order, however you want it. Looks like we've got a question. I missed the first class. How can I sign up for the first class or get a rec? April, can you post if you're listening, the YouTube channel? Thank you. Lisa, we have everything on our YouTube channel. So we'll post that for you and you can go over the first class. So this class might be a little confusing for you if you have never used REDCap before. I guess I
I've
should have
used
mentioned.
it for others. I've used it for research data, but not for surveys.
Okay, okay, awesome, awesome. Um, so again, we have one data. We have one piece of data. So if we wrote a report, it wouldn't look like much. But that is how you create reports. Once you've finished writing a report, it'll show up. There will be another line here. Let's just do a test one real quick. Um, we'll just do a first and last name report. So there's our report. Quick, simple, easy, quick numbers. It's not going to do a bunch of pie charts and fancy graphs and things like that for you. But if you need to know how many pregnant women in Lexington or Fayette County came in last month, it'll spit those numbers out for you. If you want fancier things, you need to export it into SAS or SPSS or something. If you notice, we now have another bar here that says reports. So it'll give you a list of all the reports in the project that you are able to see. Obviously, if you put a custom permissions on that report, some of the people in the project may not see that report. So that is one thing I get asked a lot. Hey, I'm on this project and I can't see a report. The first thing I'm going to say is make sure your permissions are set up to view that report. A lot of times, REDCap, if you can't see something, it's a permissions issue. Um, if your project is live, it's in production, and you create a new survey, for some reason, the default will have that survey not showing up for everyone. So you need to go in and make sure that their permissions are on view edit or whatever they need to see. This is where you would change that for each person. Every person in the project will have this box of everything that they can access. And when you create a new survey while a project is in production, it'll pop up wherever, but most of the time it has no access or no data export rights. So keep that in mind when you're adding surveys or instruments to a project that is already in circulation. So we kind of flew through that. I realize that. Are there any questions so far? We've got 15 minutes. We can do a Q&A if you all have any questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be about what we talked about today. Um, do you all have any questions or concerns, or maybe you tried something and it didn't work? Um, you can put them in the chat or you can just speak them out.
Brent, do you have any databases that like are for practice and that like people could join that already have data in them so that they could practice, let's just say reports or
No, I don't have any. I don't think RedCap has any that you can use that actually have data in them. Um, no, I don't have any. I've got a couple that I've just had for years that have data in them, but it's just stuff that I've manually entered. Just that's what I generally do is I just go in and create a project and just start adding a bunch of junk data in it. Sometimes I'll copy it from another project or things like that. That's generally what I do. Just create a project and just spend 20 or 30 minutes adding just a bunch of junk data in it.
is
How
there
about
is there
go
a
ahead?
way to give public access to one of your junk test practice databases?
No, I would have to
Okay.
manually. add
give each
everyone.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably why RedCap doesn't have something like that, simply because it'd be so hard to give everyone access. We
Gotcha.
have over 9,200 users here at UK, so that would take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, my
Oh,
suggestion would be just, yeah, create one and add some data in there. Um, because and what I do is when I add data, I just add random, if it says first name, I'll put in some numbers just to
can you?
throw RedCap
Oh,
off.
to throw it off.
Yeah, because we all know when you send it to the public, it's a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. Um, so yeah, I generally purposely try to mess up the data coming in just to see what it's going to do, see if
Okay.
my validations or whatever are correct, see what kind of errors I get.
Um, and can you import data for the purpose of, just playing and testing?
Yes, you can import data into any project. Your import tool here, as long as the data is in a CSV file, you can import data. Of course, you'll need
But
to
you
download your
can't
data
do it from
dictionary.
you can't do it from an Excel file, right? You have to change the Excel to a
Yes, a CSV, yes.
okay.
But I mean, Excel will do that.
Right.
Yeah, it'll do that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not a big one at all.
Okay.
CSV is basically Excel. It's just a
Right.
little different. I
Yeah.
mean, but yeah, you can save it from Excel right into a CSV file, no problem.
And then dump that in and be able to play around. Okay.
Yes,
Cool. Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, hold on. We got some questions here. Okay, you got the link. What does the live filters option do in the reports? That is it's live data that is currently coming in. Um, I don't think I can do it. I can't do it on this one because we don't have any. So if you have fields that are coming in, um, generally this is for if you have a whole lot of data coming in at one time. So you just sent out a survey to 1,000 people and they're all Johnny on the spot, sending in stuff immediately. Um, you can do that, and it's mostly for events and data access groups. So events are different time points within your project that data is coming in. You can do a live filter on that actual time point. And then if you have data access groups, so you have your survey going out to multiple facilities, maybe different hospitals within the area, you can do a live report on just that facility. Um, things like that. So most of these options you won't use unless it's a fairly large project, but they are there if you need them. Let's see. I had a question regarding a specific survey tool. Tool uses 27 items. Level distress subscale. Is there a way to put this?
That's my question. So, basically, what I had to do for this, it's live and it's already been distributed and it's worked out okay, but it made the survey look like 54 items just because I had to put the first 27 and the question was related, or the answer was related to frequency, and then do the second set with level of distress. So I didn't know if there was another way to do that, like kind of similar how it's side by side on the actual tool, or if that's the way I did it is the only way.
You can create, did you try using the matrix options to try that, to put them in that
I tr-
grid?
I Googled and tried a lot of different ways and I just couldn't figure it out. I even asked like others who have used this tool. They could do it in Qualtrics, but they said they didn't know in RedCap. So I just couldn't
Yeah,
figure it out.
yeah, Qualtrics, you can definitely do that. RedCap, stacking them side by side like that, um, within a matrix field, most likely you won't be able to do that. Like it'll give you a grid, but you're only going to have, I noticed that you've got two options side by side. It's only going to give you the one. So yeah, you would have 50 some options or whatever, because you would have the frequency and then you would have the distress. Um, you, let's see, there was a, you can do a, where is it? RedCap has a custom, geez, I can't even remember what it's called now. I don't think that will work for you either, though. There is a, if I could remember what it's called. I don't think it's a smart failure. A field embedding. I think it's that. But again, this is only going to stack your options side by side. Um, I don't think it's going to do. I mean, you could make it look like that on the screen, I guess, but it's not going to, it's still going to be 50 some questions. It's not going to
Okay.
put those two options in the same group.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to, back when
Yeah.
I did it, I was trying to, I didn't know if there was a different way and I just couldn't figure it out. But okay, so that's
No, not
helpful.
within RedCap. I mean, you can make it look like that, but it's not going to report or spit out the data like that. It's going to be all separated.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
that may be one that you have to use Qualtrics for if you want it to look and work just like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Questions to RedCap, like if you want to calculate BMI line, you just enter height, weight. Can you show us this? BMI, we're actually going to talk about in the next class. I'm going to have a whole section on that. Um, because it comes down to the code, the correct code that you enter. Um, we have like scale based scores calculator. Yes. So if you have all this information that you've collected, you can put a calculated field within RedCap that will calculate all that. Obviously, you need to make sure you're using the correct calculation. But we're going to talk about that. That'll all be stuff that we discuss in the next class. Calculated fields, BMIs, um, branching logic, all that sort of thing. But yes, excuse me, if you have collected the data within RedCap, you can do a calculated field on it. You just need to make sure that you're using the correct syntax and calculated um, coding. RedCap, yeah, if you've got a bunch of different scores, you can calculate it to spit out the response that you want. You can also have it, I've noticed that a lot of people do this. You can, depending on how the person answers a question, you can put a score on that and then have the score hidden at the end so they don't see their score. Because a lot of times if people see a score, they think, oh man, if it's not close to 100, they think they failed or they're going to be penalized. So you can do a hidden field that will hide that score from them, but it's still collecting the data. But yeah, all that we'll talk about in next month's class. Anything else? We've got like 3 minutes about today's class.
Are there classes like these for Qualtrics as well?
I honestly have no idea.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, I would think they would, but I'm not sure. I really don't know. And again, if you all ever have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me. Email is obviously the easiest way to get a hold of me. Um, if a month down the road you get into a project and you don't remember a single thing that we talked about today or whenever, that's completely fine. Just shoot me an email. Um, if you've got a large group of students that you're about to hire or get involved in your project, we do have the YouTube channel that they can watch. There are obviously uh, training things within RedCap that you can use, training videos, or if you just, want them to be in a class together and you want me to teach them how to do something within RedCap, just contact me and we'll set something up. All right, if you all don't have any more questions, I'll give you 2 minutes of your day left back.